He threw out his black pregnant wife for his mistress in the middle of the night. Called her pregnancy a mistake. 8 months pregnant with twins. Bare feet on cold marble. Rain pouring down like ice. His mother smiled from the window. His lover was already in their bed. You were never family. That's what he said as he locked the gates. She fell on the driveway. She bled. She begged. He turned his back and walked away. That should have been the end. A woman with nothing. Nowhere to go. No one to call. Except she made one call. 72 hours later, a black Rolls-Royce rolled through those same gates. The engine purred like a warning. The door opened. And the man who stepped out? What happened next crumbled the entire family. Before we dive into this story, a quick reality check. 97% of you aren't subscribed to this channel. If you want more stories like this, stories about women who refuse to stay broken, you need to subscribe to this channel now and drop a comment telling us the time of where you are watching from. 1 second. 1 click. Do it now, then let's begin. Mariah stood at the edge of the Hawthorne estate, her fingers trembling as she touched the cold iron gates for the first time. 6 months ago, Gregory had knelt before her in a small cafe, rain streaking the windows, his voice breaking as he promised her a life she had only seen in movies. "You're everything I never knew I needed," he had whispered, sliding the ring onto her finger. She believed him. Why wouldn't she? His eyes held nothing but warmth then, his hands gentle, his words painting a future where love conquered everything. But standing here now, watching the mansion loom like a marble tomb, something twisted in her chest. She pushed the feeling down. This was her new life. This was love. The wedding had been small, intimate, exactly what she wanted. Gregory's mother Victoria had been absent, claiming illness. Though the staff whispered, she refused to acknowledge a daughter-in-law with no pedigree, no fortune, no name worth mentioning. Mariah told herself it didn't matter. She had Gregory. That was enough. Or so she thought. The first dinner at the estate shattered that illusion. Victoria sat at the head of a table, silver hair pulled tight, eyes like shards of ice. She didn't speak to Mariah directly. Instead, she turned to Gregory. "I assume she knows how we do things here?" Gregory's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Mariah reached for his hand under the table. He pulled away. "I'm sure I can learn," Mariah said, her voice steady despite the knot forming in her throat. Victoria's lips curved, but it wasn't a smile. Learning implies capacity. The words hung in the air like smoke. The servants froze. Gregory stared at his plate. Mariah felt her face burn, but she forced herself to nod, to smile, to pretend the insult hadn't landed. That night, alone in their bedroom, she waited for Gregory to defend her, to acknowledge what his mother had done. He said nothing. He simply turned off the light and went to sleep. That was the first crack. The weeks that followed were a slow unraveling. Victoria's comments became routine, little cuts disguised as observations. "Mariah, dear, we dress for dinner here. That's more appropriate for, well, wherever you're from." The staff began treating her differently, their polite smiles replaced with careful distance, as if associating with her might cost them their positions. Gregory grew colder. The man who had once listened to her dreams now checked his phone when she spoke. The man who had promised partnership now corrected her in front of others. "That's not how we do it, Mariah. Just watch and learn." She tried. God, how she tried. She studied the family history, learned their routines, and smiled through every slight. But nothing was ever enough. Then Lila appeared. Mariah first saw her at a family gathering, draped in silk and confidence, her laughter bright and sharp as broken glass. She touched Gregory's arm too long, whispered things that made him smile the way he used to smile at Mariah. "Who is she?" Mariah asked later, her voice small. Gregory didn't look up from his desk. "An old friend. Family friend, actually. Mother adores her." Of course she did. Lila was everything Mariah wasn't. Wealthy, connected, polished in ways that didn't require effort. She fit into their world like a missing puzzle piece, while Mariah remained the outsider, the mistake, the charity case Gregory had foolishly married. The pregnancy should have changed things. Mariah discovered it on a Tuesday morning. 2 pink lines that made her heart race with hope. She imagined Gregory's face lighting up, his arms around her, his promises renewed. She found him in his study, Lila's perfume still lingering in the air. "Gregory, I have something to tell you." He glanced up, annoyed. "Can it wait?" "I'm busy." She couldn't wait. She had waited too long already. "I'm pregnant." The silence stretched. His expression didn't change. No joy, no surprise, just calculation. "Are you sure?" The question stung worse than any of Victoria's insults. "Yes, I'm sure." He nodded slowly, his eyes distant. "We'll discuss this later." He never brought it up again. Victoria found out 3 days later. Mariah never learned how, but the matriarch knew everything that happened in her house. She summoned Mariah to the sitting room, the same place where she held court over the family's decisions. "Sit." Mariah sat. Victoria studied her like an insect under glass. A child. How convenient. Mariah's hands instinctively moved to her stomach. "It wasn't planned, but nothing. You thought this would secure your place here, didn't you? Thought a baby would make you untouchable." The accusation knocked the air from Mariah's lungs. "No, save it. I've seen your type before. Desperate girls who trap wealthy men with pregnancies, thinking it's a meal ticket." Tears burned Mariah's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "That's not true. I love Gregory." Victoria laughed cold and sharp. "Love. How quaint." The months that followed were held dressed in silk and marble. Mariah's body changed, her belly growing, her back aching, but no one seemed to notice or care. Gregory stopped coming to bed. The staff avoided eye contact. Victoria's comments grew sharper, each one designed to remind Mariah she didn't belong, that her child was unwanted, that she was nothing more than an embarrassment the family tolerated. Have you ever felt invisible in a room full of people? That was Mariah's existence now. She would sit at dinners, her plate untouched, listening to conversations that deliberately excluded her, watching Gregory laugh with Lila while his pregnant wife faded into the background. One night, 7 months pregnant, Mariah found Gregory in the library with Lila. They weren't touching, but the intimacy in their proximity said everything. Lila saw her first, her smile widening. "Mariah, we were just discussing the charity gala. You probably won't be attending, given your condition." Gregory didn't defend her, didn't even look her way. Mariah's voice came out steady despite the tremor in her hands. "I'd like to attend. It's important." Lila's eyebrow arched. "Important? Darling, you'd be more comfortable at home. These events require a certain presentation." The word hung between them like a weapon. Gregory finally spoke, his tone flat. "Lila's right. You should rest." That night, Mariah lay awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling her baby kick against her ribs. She thought about her brother Andre, who had called less frequently since the wedding, who had warned her that the Hawthorns were poison wrapped in prestige. She had dismissed his concerns, blinded by love. Now alone in the dark, she wondered if he had been right all along. She whispered into the silence, her hand on her belly. "I'll protect you, no matter what." She had no idea how prophetic those words would become. How could she know that in 2 short weeks she would be standing in the rain, cast out and humiliated, her world shattered? How could she know that the very people she had tried to love would become her cruelest enemies? The warning signs were everywhere. She just refused to see them, until it was too late. The morning started with silence, the kind that pressed against Mariah's chest like a warning. She woke alone again, Gregory's side of the bed cold and untouched. 8 months pregnant now, her body heavy and aching. She moved slowly through the routine of getting dressed, each movement deliberate, careful. The twins, she had learned 2 weeks ago there were 2, shifted inside her, restless. She placed her hand on her belly, whispering promises she wasn't sure she could keep. The house felt different today. Wrong. The staff who usually greeted her with polite nods now avoided the hallways entirely. She found the breakfast room empty, the table set for one. Her one. When she asked the housekeeper where everyone was, the woman's eyes filled with something that looked like pity. The family is in the west parlor, ma'am. They've asked not to be disturbed. Mariah's stomach turned. Something was coming. She could feel it in the air, thick and suffocating. She made her way to the west parlor, her hand trailing along the wall for balance. The voices inside stopped the moment she reached the door. She knocked softly. No answer. She knocked again, louder this time. Gregory. The door swung open, but it wasn't her husband standing there. It was Victoria, her face arranged in an expression of cold satisfaction. We were just discussing you, actually. How fortunate. Come in. The word fortunate dripped with venom. Mariah stepped inside, her eyes immediately finding Gregory. He sat on the sofa, Lila beside him, so close their shoulders touched. He wouldn't meet Mariah's gaze. Lila, however, stared directly at her, a smile playing at her lips like she was watching her favorite show reach its climax. Sit down, Mariah, Victoria commanded, gesturing to a chair positioned in the center of the room, facing them all like an interrogation. Mariah remained standing. What's going on? Gregory finally looked at her, and what she saw in his eyes made her blood run cold. Not anger, not even cruelty, just emptiness. This isn't working, he said simply, as if discussing a failed business venture. What isn't working? Her voice came out smaller than she intended. This. Us. You. The words landed like punches. Mariah's hand instinctively moved to her belly, protective. Gregory, what are you talking about? We're about to have babies. Our babies. Lila laughed, light and airy. Oh, sweetie, that's precisely the problem. Victoria stepped forward, her presence dominating the room. Let me be clear, since my son seems incapable of directness. You were a mistake from the beginning, a lapse in judgment we've tolerated far too long. This pregnancy, she gestured at Mariah's belly with disgust, was the final straw. We've consulted with lawyers. You have no claim to this family, this estate, or its fortune. The prenuptial agreement you signed was quite clear. Mariah's mind raced. What prenuptial? I never signed. You did, Gregory interrupted, his tone flat. You just didn't read it carefully enough. My mistake is assuming you understood legal documents. The insult barely registered. Mariah was too busy trying to breathe, trying to process what was happening. You're my husband. These are your children. Are they? Lila's voice cut through the room like a blade. How can anyone be certain? You came from nothing, desperate for security. Who knows what you were doing before Gregory took pity on you? The accusation hung in the air, so outrageous Mariah almost laughed. Almost. But the look on Gregory's face stopped her. He believed it. Or he wanted to. You can't be serious, Mariah whispered. Gregory, you know me. You know I don't know anything anymore, he said, standing now, creating more distance between them. What I do know is that this marriage was a mistake, one I intend to correct. Victoria moved to the door, opening it wide. 2 security guards stood in the hallway, waiting. You have 1 hour to gather your personal belongings. Nothing from this house, nothing the family has provided. Only what you brought with you. Mariah's legs nearly gave out. You're throwing me out? I'm 8 months pregnant with twins. Yes, well, Victoria said coldly. Perhaps you should have considered your situation before trapping my son. Have you ever watched your entire world collapse in real time? Mariah stood there, 8 months pregnant, surrounded by people she had tried desperately to love, people who were now looking at her like garbage to be disposed of. The cruelty was so complete, so calculated. She almost couldn't process it. Gregory walked past her without a word, Lila following, her hand possessively on his arm. They left the room together, leaving Mariah alone with Victoria and the guards. Please, Mariah said, her voice breaking. Please don't do this. Where am I supposed to go? Victoria's expression didn't change. That's no longer my concern. You have 58 minutes. The guards stepped forward. Mariah held up her hand. I can walk by myself. But she couldn't, not really. Each step toward her room felt like walking through water, her body heavy with pregnancy and shock, her mind screaming that this couldn't be real, couldn't be happening. In her room, she grabbed what she could, clothes, a few photographs, her phone. Her hands shook so badly she could barely grip anything. The twins kicked hard, as if sensing her panic. "It's okay," she whispered to them, tears streaming down her face. "It's going to be okay." But she didn't believe it. How could it be okay? She was being thrown out of her home by her husband, accused of infidelity by his mistress, cast aside like trash by the family she had tried to join. The staff watched as she was escorted down the grand staircase, their faces carefully blank. Some looked away. Others stared with something between pity and relief that it wasn't them. The marble floors she had once thought beautiful now felt like ice beneath her feet. At the bottom of the stairs, Victoria waited with a final pronouncement. "If you attempt to contact Gregory, to claim any connection to this family, or to involve yourself in our affairs, we will destroy you in ways you cannot imagine. Do you understand?" Mariah's throat was too tight to answer. She nodded. The front doors opened. Rain poured from a sky gone dark with storm clouds, the wind howling like something alive and angry. Mariah had no coat, no umbrella, no car. She stood at the threshold, looking out at the violence of the weather, then back at the warmth of the house she was being expelled from. "Well," Victoria said, "we're waiting." Mariah stepped into the rain. The cold hit her like a physical blow, soaking through her thin dress in seconds. She heard the doors close behind her, the lock clicking with finality. The driveway stretched ahead, long and winding, the gates far in the distance. She started walking. Each step was agony. Her feet, bare because she'd been wearing house slippers when summoned to the parlor, slipped on the wet stones. The rain blinded her, plastered her hair to her face, and made breathing difficult. The twins shifted and kicked, disturbed by the cold and her elevated heart rate. She wrapped her arms around her belly, trying to protect them, trying to keep moving. Halfway down the driveway, her legs gave out. She fell to her knees on the gravel, the sharp stones cutting into her skin. Pain shot through her, but it was nothing compared to the pain in her chest, the realization that the man she loved, the man whose children she carried, had just thrown her away like she meant nothing. Because to him, she was nothing. She had always been nothing. A servant whispered from a window above, barely audible over the storm. Poor thing. They're monsters, all of them. But no one came to help. No one dared. Mariah forced herself to stand, forced herself to keep walking. The gates opened automatically as she approached, programmed to let anyone out, never to let the wrong people in. She was definitely the wrong person. She stumbled through them, onto the street beyond, into a world that suddenly felt impossibly large and hostile. A car passed, its headlights illuminating her for a moment before speeding away. She kept walking, no destination in mind, just moving because stopping meant accepting this was real. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out with numb fingers, the screen cracked, but still working. A text from an unknown number. "You've been removed from all family accounts. Do not contact us again." They had thought of everything, every cruelty, every humiliation, every way to ensure she understood she was alone. Mariah found herself in front of a small guest house on the edge of town, the kind of place that is rented by the week to people with nowhere else to go. She had just enough money in her personal account, the one she'd maintained from before the marriage, for 3 nights. 3 nights to figure out what came next. The room was cold, sparse, the walls thin enough to hear every sound from the street. She peeled off her wet clothes, her body shaking uncontrollably. In the bathroom mirror, she barely recognized herself. Her face was hollow, eyes red from crying, hair matted from the rain. She climbed into bed fully dressed in dry clothes, pulling the thin blanket tight around herself and the twins. Outside, the storm raged. Inside, she felt something else building, something beyond despair. It started small, just a flicker, a memory of her brother's voice from years ago when she'd called him crying about a failed job interview. "Listen to me, Mariah. When people try to break you, when they push you down and spit on you and tell you you're nothing, that's when you find out who you really are. That's when you decide if you're going to stay down or get back up swinging." She had gotten back up then. Could she do it now? With 2 babies coming, no money, no home, no one to turn to? The answer should have been no. The logical answer was despair, giving up, and accepting that Gregory and Victoria and Lila had won. But as the twins kicked against her ribs, as she felt their life and strength and absolute dependence on her, something shifted. They hadn't just thrown her out. They had made the biggest mistake of their lives. They just didn't know it yet. The first night in the guest house was the longest of Mariah's life. Every sound outside felt like a threat. Footsteps on gravel, voices in the distance, the howl of wind that wouldn't stop. She lay curled on her side, the only position that didn't hurt, one hand on her belly where the twins seemed as restless as she was. Sleep came in fragments, broken by pain that shot through her lower back and waves of panic that made her heart race so fast she thought it might burst. At 3 a.m, she sat up, gasping, certain something was wrong with the babies. She pressed her hands against her stomach, waiting, praying for movement. One kick, then another. She exhaled, tears streaming down her face, relief and terror mixing into something she couldn't name. "I'm sorry," she whispered to them. "I'm so sorry you got me as a mother. I should have protected you better. Should have seen this coming." But how could she have seen it? Love had made her blind, desperate to belong, willing to accept crumbs of affection from people who saw her as nothing. Morning brought no relief. Sunlight filtered through the thin curtains, harsh and unforgiving, illuminating the reality of her situation. She had 2 more nights paid for in this room. After that, nothing. Her bank account showed $347. Her phone had 17 missed calls, all from numbers she didn't recognize. Debt collectors, probably, for bills Gregory had put in her name. She had no family nearby. Her parents had passed years ago, and Andre, her brother, had moved overseas for business. They talked occasionally, but she had hidden the worst of her marriage from him, too ashamed to admit she had made such a catastrophic mistake. He had warned her about Gregory during the engagement. "Something's off about him, Mariah. The way he looks at you, it's like he's calculating something, not feeling something." She had defended Gregory fiercely, accusing Andre of being jealous of her happiness. They had barely spoken since the wedding. Pride was a poison she had swallowed willingly, and now she was choking on it. She forced herself to stand, to move, to function despite every cell in her body screaming to give up. The bathroom mirror showed a stranger, face swollen from crying, eyes hollow with exhaustion, skin pale except for the dark circles that made her look decades older. She splashed cold water on her face, the shock of it helping her focus. First priority, food. She hadn't eaten since yesterday morning. Second priority, a plan. Any plan. She couldn't stay here forever. The guest house owner, a weathered woman named Clara, who looked like she had seen every type of misery humanity could offer, knocked on the door around noon. "You okay in there? Heard you crying last night." Mariah opened the door, trying to arrange her face into something resembling okay. "I'm fine. Just a difficult night." Clara's eyes dropped to Mariah's belly, then back to her face. "You're not fine. When's the last time you ate?" "Yesterday. I'm about to go get something." "Save your money. I'll bring you soup." The kindness was so unexpected, so undeserved, that Mariah nearly broke down again. "You don't have to. I know I don't have to. But I'm going to. Sit down before you fall down." Clara returned 20 minutes later with soup that was more vegetables and broth than anything fancy. But it was hot and it was food, and Mariah ate it like she hadn't eaten in days. Because, essentially, she hadn't. Not really. Clara sat across from her, arms folded, studying her with eyes that missed nothing. "Man trouble." Mariah almost laughed at the understatement. "You could say that. They always are. Trouble, I mean. Men. Got a place to go after your 3 nights are up?" The question Mariah had been avoiding asking herself hung in the air between them. She shook her head. "Thought so. Listen, I got a storage room in the back. Nothing fancy, barely bigger than a closet, but it's got a cot and it's warm. You can stay there if you help with cleaning. Can't pay you, but you'll have a roof." Have you ever had someone save your life without even knowing it? That's what Clara did at that moment. "Why would you do that for me?" Mariah asked, her voice cracking. "You don't even know me." Clara shrugged. "Don't need to know you to see you're in trouble." Besides, I was you once. Different circumstances, same desperation. Someone helped me. Now I help when I can. Mariah wanted to refuse, to say she didn't need charity, but the twins kicked hard, reminding her this wasn't about her pride anymore. Thank you. I don't know how to repay you. Don't need to repay. Just don't make me regret it. That afternoon, Mariah moved her few belongings into the storage room. Clara hadn't lied. It was barely bigger than a closet, with a cot, a small heater, and a single light bulb hanging from a ceiling. But it was a shelter. It was survival. She spent the rest of the day helping Clara change sheets and clean rooms, her body protesting every movement, but her mind grateful for the distraction. Physical pain was easier to handle than the emotional devastation that threatened to swallow her whole whenever she stopped moving. That night, alone in the storage room, Mariah finally allowed herself to think about Andre. Her phone sat on the cot beside her, fully charged but silent. She hadn't called him because what would she say? That she had ignored his warnings, married a monster, and was now homeless and pregnant with twins? That she needed help after spending months pushing him away? Pride battled with desperation, and desperation was winning. She picked up the phone, scrolled to his contact, her finger hovering over the call button. Then she saw the date. It had been 8 months since they last spoke. 8 months of silence, because she had been too stubborn to admit he was right. What if he didn't answer? Worse, what if he did answer and said he told her so? She put the phone down. She'd survived this long on her own. She could figure it out without running back to the brother she had pushed away. But the twins had other plans. Around midnight, pain unlike anything she'd experienced before tore through her abdomen. She gasped, doubling over, her hand clutching her belly as the twins seemed to revolt inside her. False labor, maybe. Or real labor, too early, in a storage room with no medical help. Panic clawed at her throat. She tried to breathe through it, the way she'd read in pregnancy books, but the pain was overwhelming, stealing her air, making her vision blur. Another contraction hit, stronger than the first. She fumbled for her phone, her hands shaking so badly she could barely grip it. She needed help. I needed a hospital. I needed someone, anyone. Her finger hit Andre's contact by accident, the call connecting before she could stop it. It rang once, twice, 3 times. She was about to hang up when his voice came through, groggy with sleep. Mariah, it's 1 a.m. What's wrong? She tried to speak, but another contraction stole her words, replacing them with a cry of pain she couldn't suppress. Mariah. His voice was sharp now, alert. Talk to me. What's happening? She gasped, tears streaming. I'm in trouble, Andre. I need help. Where are you? Port Haven. The Riverside Guest House. Another wave of pain cut her off. She heard movement on his end, rapid and purposeful. Stay on the phone with me. Don't hang up. I'm getting you help right now. His voice became distant as he spoke to someone else, giving rapid instructions she couldn't fully process through the pain. Then he was back. Ambulance is coming. 10 minutes. Can you get to the front of the building? I'll try. She pushed herself up, every movement agony, and stumbled toward the door. Clara appeared in the hallway, awakened by the noise. Sweet Jesus. What's happening? Contractions. Too early. Ambulance coming. Clara grabbed her arm, supporting her weight as they made their way through the building. You got someone on the phone? My brother. Good. You need family right now. They reached the entrance, just as sirens pierced the night. The paramedics moved with practiced efficiency, asking questions Mariah could barely answer through the pain. Andre's voice stayed on the phone, talking to her, keeping her conscious, refusing to let her slip into the panic that threatened to drown her. You're going to be okay, Mariah. The babies are going to be okay. I'm coming. Do you hear me? I'm on my way. She wanted to ask from where, to ask how when he was overseas, but the pain was too consuming. They loaded her into the ambulance, Clara squeezing her hand once before letting go. You fight, girl. You hear me? You fight for those babies. The ambulance doors closed. The siren wailed. And through it all, Andre's voice remained constant on the phone, a lifeline in the chaos. I'm getting on a plane right now. Private jet. I'll be there in 6 hours. Just hold on, Mariah. Just hold on. 6 hours felt like an eternity. But as the ambulance raced through the dark streets, as the paramedics worked to stabilize her, as the pain continued to tear through her body, Mariah realized something that cut through even the physical agony. She wasn't alone anymore. The twins weren't coming yet. The doctors at the emergency room confirmed it was severe false labor brought on by stress and dehydration. They kept her overnight for observation, hooking her up to monitors that beeped steadily, reassuringly. The babies were fine. Strong heartbeats. Active. Resilient. Like their mother, whether she knew it yet or not. Mariah lay in the hospital bed, exhausted but unable to sleep, replaying the last 48 hours in her mind. Thrown out. Homeless. Desperate. Saved by a stranger's kindness and a brother she thought she'd lost. The shame of needing rescue warred with the relief of not being alone. Her phone buzzed with a text from Andre. Landed. On my way to the hospital. We need to talk. Those last 4 words carried weight. She knew what was coming. Questions she didn't want to answer. Truths she didn't want to confess. The full extent of her humiliation laid bare. But maybe that's what she needed. Maybe the only way forward was through complete honesty, through admitting she had failed, through accepting help even when pride screamed against it. When Andre walked through that hospital room door, everything would change. She just didn't know how much. Not yet. Andre walked through the hospital room door at 6:43 in the morning, and Mariah barely recognized him. The brother she remembered wore casual clothes and had an easy smile. This man wore a tailored suit that probably cost more than her entire wardrobe, moved with the quiet confidence of someone used to commanding rooms, and had eyes that assessed everything in seconds. He stopped at the foot of her bed, his expression unreadable. You look terrible. The bluntness was so unexpected that Mariah almost laughed. Thanks. That's exactly what every woman wants to hear. I'm not here to make you feel better with lies. He pulled a chair close to the bed and sat, leaning forward, his elbows on his knees. I'm here because you called me in the middle of the night, in pain and alone. So before we get to anything else, tell me the truth. All of it. What the hell happened to you? The question opened a floodgate Mariah had been holding back for months. Everything poured out, the marriage to Gregory, the cruelty of Victoria, the constant humiliation, Lila's presence, the accusations of infidelity, being thrown out in the rain while 8 months pregnant with twins. Andre's expression didn't change as she spoke, but his hands clenched tighter with each revelation until his knuckles went white. When she finished, silence filled the room, heavy and suffocating. Say something, Mariah whispered. Anything. Andre stood, walked to the window, his back to her. When he finally spoke, his voice was cold, controlled, and dangerous. You remember when I told you not to marry him? When I said something was wrong? Mariah's throat tightened. I remember. You told me I was jealous, that I couldn't stand to see you happy, that I didn't understand love. Each word landed like an accusation. I was wrong. I'm sorry. Sorry. He turned to face her. You're sorry. That fixes it. Andre, please, do you have any idea what I've been doing for the last 8 months? While you were playing house with people who saw you as garbage. The anger in his voice shocked her. She had expected disappointment, maybe pity, but not this fury. I didn't know. No, you didn't. Because you cut me out. Stopped returning my calls. Made excuses every time I tried to visit. I knew something was wrong, Mariah. I felt it. But you locked me out. Tears burned her eyes. I was ashamed. I didn't want you to know you were right. Right. His laugh was bitter. You think I wanted to be right? You're my sister. My only family. I would have given anything to be wrong. He sat back down, running a hand over his face, some of the anger draining into exhaustion. But I wasn't wrong. And because I knew the kind of people the Hawthorns were, I took precautions. Mariah frowned. What kind of precautions? Andre pulled out his phone, tapped the screen a few times, then turned it to face her. What she saw made no sense. Bank accounts, legal documents, property deeds, all with her name on them. What is this? Insurance, Andre said simply. The day you told me you were engaged to Gregory Hawthorne, I started digging. The family has a history of this. Marrying women from modest backgrounds, using them, then discarding them with nothing. It's a pattern going back 3 generations. The words didn't compute. That can't be true. Gregory loved me. Gregory is incapable of love. He's a puppet controlled by his mother, who's controlled by greed and status. They saw you as convenient. Young, naive, desperate to belong. The perfect victim. Each word was a knife, cutting away the last shreds of the illusion Mariah had been clinging to. If you knew all this, why didn't you stop me? I tried. Andre's voice rose. I told you to wait, to let me investigate, to sign a post-nuptial agreement. You accused me of trying to ruin your happiness. What was I supposed to do? Kidnap you? Mariah had no answer. He was right. She had been so desperate to believe in the fairy tale that she had ignored every warning, every red flag, every piece of evidence that Gregory was not who he claimed to be. So what are these documents? She asked quietly. Protection. I set up trusts in your name that Gregory couldn't access. Put property in your name that he didn't know about. Make sure that when things fall apart, you wouldn't be completely destroyed. He swiped to another screen. These are the twins. Mariah's heart stopped. What about the twins? They're legally protected. I had papers drawn up the moment you told me you were pregnant. Trust funds, medical care, education, everything. Gregory can't touch any of it. Neither can Victoria. Even if they try to claim parental rights, which they won't because that would require acknowledging the children exist, they have zero access to the money. The implications were staggering. How much money are we talking about? Andre's smile was thin. Enough that your children will never want for anything. Enough that you can tell the Hawthorns exactly where they can shove their precious estate. Andre, where did you get this kind of money? The question hung between them. He leaned back, studying her with an expression she couldn't read. You really don't know, do you? You never asked what I've been doing the last 10 years. You said you were in business overseas. Import-export or something. Or something. He pulled up another screen on his phone, this one showing a news article. The headline read, Tech billionaire Andre Collins closes another record-breaking deal. The photo showed her brother shaking hands with someone Mariah vaguely recognized as important. That's you. Her voice came out as a whisper. That's me. I built 3 companies from nothing. Sold 2 for amounts that made international news. And the third is currently valued at somewhere around $8 billion. Give or take. Mariah couldn't breathe. $8 billion. Her brother. The same person who used to share a cramped apartment with her when their parents died. Who worked 2 jobs to help pay for her community college classes. Who she thought was doing okay, but nothing extraordinary. Why didn't you tell me? Because you were so focused on marrying into wealth that I didn't want you to see me as an ATM. I wanted you to choose your own path, make your own decisions. I just made sure that if those decisions went bad, you'd have a safety net. The revelation was overwhelming. Her brother wasn't just successful. He was powerful. The kind of power that made the Hawthorns look like small-time players. So what happens now? Andre's expression hardened. Now we destroy them. The words sent a chill through her. What do you mean destroy them? I mean exactly that. They threw you out like garbage, accused you of infidelity, called your children mistakes, humiliated you in ways that should be criminal. You think I'm going to let that slide? Andre, I just want to move on, to focus on the babies. And you will. But first, we make sure they never do this to anyone else. We expose them for what they are. We take everything they value and crush it. Not with violence, not with threats, but with the one thing they worship, power and money. And I have more of both than they could dream of. Mariah's mind raced. Part of her wanted revenge, wanted to see Gregory and Victoria and Lila suffer the way they had made her suffer. But another part, the part that was exhausted and scared and just wanted peace, hesitated. What if I say no? What if I just want to disappear and raise my children quietly? Andre reached over and took her hand, his grip firm but gentle. Then I'll respect that. I'll make sure you and the twins have everything you need, and we'll never speak of the Hawthorns again. But, Mariah, think about this. Those babies you're carrying? They're going to ask questions someday. They're going to want to know about their father, about why he's not in their lives. What are you going to tell them? That he threw you out and you just accepted it? Or that he threw you out and you made damn sure he regretted it? The question cut deep. What would she tell her children? How could she raise them to be strong if she had been weak? I need time to think, she said finally. You don't have time. Victoria and Gregory are already moving to erase you completely. Legal documents filed yesterday to annul the marriage on grounds of fraud. They're claiming you lied about your background, that the marriage was never legitimate. If that goes through, the twins have no legal claim to anything Hawthorne. They become bastards in the eyes of the law and society. Rage flooded through Mariah, hot and fierce. They can't do that. They're doing it, right now, while you're lying in this hospital bed, recovering from the stress they caused. Andre leaned closer. But here's what they don't know. I own the law firm they're using. I bought it 6 months ago when I found out they were the Hawthorns' preferred firm. Every document they file, every strategy they plan, I know about it before the ink dries. We can counter every move. We can bury them so deep they'll never see daylight again. But only if you're willing to fight. Have you ever reached a point where you had to choose between who you were and who you needed to become? Mariah was at that point now. She thought about the twins sleeping inside her, innocent and trusting. She thought about the life she had tried to build, the love she had believed in, the family she had wanted. All of it was a lie. All of it was manipulation and cruelty disguised as acceptance. Gregory didn't love her. Victoria had never intended to accept her. Lila had been waiting in the wings the entire time. She had been nothing but a temporary amusement, a way for them to feel charitable before disposing of her. What's the first step? She asked, her voice steady despite the emotions churning inside her. Andre smiled, and for the first time since entering the room, it reached his eyes. The first step is getting you out of this hospital and somewhere safe. Somewhere they can't find you, can't touch you, can't even breathe the same air as you. I've got a place, secure, comfortable, fully staffed with medical professionals who will make sure you and the twins are healthy. You'll stay there until after the birth. And then we show up at their door in a way they'll never forget. We let them think they've won, that you've disappeared, that they're safe. We let their guard drop. And when they're at their most comfortable, their most arrogant, we hit them with everything. The plan was bold, calculated, and exactly what the Hawthorns deserved. One condition, Mariah said. Anything. When this is over, when they're exposed and ruined and suffering, I want to be the one to tell them. I want to look Gregory in the eye and let him know that every moment of cruelty he showed me was a nail in his own coffin. I want Victoria to understand that underestimating me was the biggest mistake of her life. Can you promise me that? Andre stood, pulling her into a careful hug that minded her pregnant belly, but conveyed absolute support. I promise. This is your victory, Mariah. I'm just making sure you have the weapons to claim it. As he pulled back, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his expression darkening. What is it? Mariah asked. Text from my contact at the law firm. Gregory and Lila just filed paperwork to get married. They're fast-tracking it, trying to make it legal before your annulment even goes through. The betrayal shouldn't have hurt anymore. Mariah thought she was numb to it. But learning that Gregory was already planning his next wedding while she carried his children felt like being gutted all over again. Andre saw the pain on her face. Good, he said coldly. Let him marry her. Let them think they're building something. It'll make it that much sweeter when we tear it all down. And at that moment, Mariah made her choice. Not for revenge, not for money, but for her children. So they would never have to wonder if their mother had been weak. So they would know that when the world tried to break her, she became unbreakable. The safe house Andre secured wasn't what Mariah expected. She had imagined something sterile and temporary, but instead he brought her to a sprawling property hidden behind tall gates and ancient oak trees, the kind of place that whispered old money and absolute privacy. The staff greeted her with professional warmth. A private nurse named Helen who checked her vitals twice daily. A cook who prepared meals specifically designed for her pregnancy. And security personnel who remained invisible but ever present. "This is too much," Mariah said the first evening, standing in a bedroom larger than the entire guest house where she'd been staying. Andre unpacked her meager belongings, which looked pathetic in the enormous walk-in closet. "This is the minimum of what you deserve. Get used to it." She watched him arrange her few clothes with careful precision. This brother who had become a stranger and her salvation all at once. "I don't know how to repay you. You don't repay your family. You just let them help." He closed the closet door and turned to face her. "Now, we need to talk about strategy. Are you ready? Or do you need rest first?" Mariah was exhausted, her body aching from the stress of the last week, but her mind was sharp with purpose. "I'm ready." They sat in a study, a room lined with books and dominated by a mahogany desk, where Andre spread out documents like a general planning a campaign. "First thing you need to understand, this isn't about quick revenge. This is about systematic destruction. We're going to dismantle everything they value, piece by piece, and they won't even see it coming until it's too late." He pulled up a document on his laptop. "Gregory's company is barely solvent. He likes to project wealth, but the truth is the Hawthorne fortune is built on loans, mortgages, and investments that are failing. Victoria has been covering the losses by selling off properties quietly, trying to maintain appearances. They're drowning Mariah. They just hide it well." The revelation stunned her. But the estate, the cars, the lifestyle, all leverage, all debt. The estate itself is mortgaged 3 times over. One significant financial hit, and the whole house of cards collapses. Andre's smile was sharp. "And I'm about to provide that hit." "How?" "I own the banks holding their mortgages. Well, my investment firms do. I've been buying up their debt for the last 6 months, consolidating it under companies they don't know are connected to me. When the time comes, I call those debts due. All at once. They'll have 30 days to pay or lose everything." Mariah's mind struggled to process the scale of what he was describing. "Is that legal?" "Perfectly legal. Happens in business every day. The difference is most people don't have someone personally motivated to destroy them, holding all their financial strings." He clicked to another file. "But the financial destruction is just the foundation. The real damage comes from exposure. I've had investigators digging into the Hawthorne family history for months. Want to know what they found?" Mariah wasn't sure she did, but she nodded. Andre's expression darkened as he read from the report. 3 previous marriages for Gregory. All ended in annulments or quiet divorces. All to women from modest backgrounds. All disposed of once they served their purpose or became inconvenient. "You weren't the first, Mariah. You were just the most recent." The words hit like physical blows. She hadn't been special, hadn't been loved, had simply been the latest in a pattern of cruelty that stretched back years. Why? Why do they keep doing this? Victoria. It's always been Victoria. She has some twisted need to prove that no woman is good enough for her son, that love is a weakness, that loyalty to family wealth trumps everything. She picks vulnerable women, lets Gregory charm them, then systematically destroys them to reinforce her control over him. It's pathological. Mariah felt sick. What happened to the other women? 2 disappeared from public life completely. 1 moved overseas. None of them fought back because Victoria made sure they had nothing. No money, no proof, no resources. They took settlement payments and signed non-disclosure agreements, then vanished. Andre leaned forward. But you're not going to vanish. You're going to be the one they couldn't break. The one who ended the pattern permanently. Over the following weeks, Mariah watched from her hidden sanctuary as Andre orchestrated the first phase of their plan. She attended video meetings where lawyers discussed strategy, where investigators presented findings, where financial experts outlined the intricacies of corporate warfare. At first, it was overwhelming. The jargon, the complexity, the sheer scale of resources being deployed on her behalf. But gradually, she began to understand. This wasn't just about punishing Gregory and Victoria. It was about justice for every woman they had destroyed, every life they had ruined, every heart they had broken for sport. Helen, the nurse, checked on her one afternoon while she was reviewing documents. "You should be resting, not working." Mariah looked up from the laptop. "This is rest. Knowing I'm not helpless anymore, that's the best rest I've had in months." Helen smiled, checking Mariah's blood pressure. "Your numbers are better. Stress levels down. The babies are thriving. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. The babies." Mariah placed her hand on her belly, feeling the move, strong and active. They had become her reason for everything. Not revenge for its own sake, but ensuring that her children would grow up knowing their mother had been strong, had fought back, and had refused to be erased. "Can I ask you something?" Mariah said as Helen packed up her equipment. "Of course. If someone treated you the way my husband treated me, would you fight back? Or would you just move on and try to forget?" Helen was quiet for a moment. "I was married once to a man who made me feel worthless. Told me I was lucky he stayed, that no one else would want me. I believed him for 5 years. Then one day I woke up and realized I'd rather be alone and respected than partnered and destroyed. I left with nothing but my nursing degree and rebuilt my entire life. Best decision I ever made." She met Mariah's eyes. "But if I'd had someone like your brother, someone who could have made that man face consequences for his cruelty, I would have taken that chance in a heartbeat. Not for revenge, but for closure, for proof that I mattered." The conversation stayed with Mariah. That's what this was really about, proving she mattered, that her pain wasn't meaningless, that women couldn't be discarded like trash without consequences. 2 weeks into her stay at the safe house, Andre arrived with news. "They're getting sloppy. Gregory's spending money he doesn't have, throwing parties, buying Lila jewelry. He's acting like a man who's won, like he's untouchable." "Let him," Mariah said, surprised by the coldness in her own voice. "Let him feel safe. Let him think I crawled away to die somewhere. It'll make it better when we show up." About that, Andre pulled out his phone, showing her photos. "Gregory and Lila's engagement party is in 3 weeks. Big event, all of society invited. Victoria's sparing no expense, which is ironic since she doesn't actually have the money she's spending. It's the perfect venue for the first public move." Mariah's heart raced. What kind of move? Nothing dramatic. Just a reminder that you exist, that you're not destroyed, that they should have been more careful. "We're going to send a gift." What kind of gift? Andre's smile was dangerous. A legal notice. Hand-delivered during the party by a courier who won't leave until Gregory signs for it. The notice will inform him that his annulment petition has been denied due to evidence of fraud on his part, not yours. That you're contesting every claim. That the twins are legally his heirs, whether he likes it or not. The thought of ruining Gregory's perfect party, of watching his smug confidence crack in front of all his society friends, sent a thrill through Mariah. He'll lose his mind. He'll lose more than that. The denial of the annulment means the debt I'm about to call is marital debt, which means you have legal claim to half of everything, including the estate. Victoria is going to have a stroke when her lawyers explain the implications. "This is really happening," Mariah whispered. "This is really happening," Andre confirmed. "And once it starts, there's no stopping it. Are you absolutely sure you want to go through with this? Because once that notice is delivered, the Hawthorns will come at you with everything they have. It'll get ugly." Mariah thought about the rain-soaked night they threw her out. The accusations of infidelity while she carried Gregory's children. The way Victoria had looked at her with such contempt. The text message cut her off from all accounts. The casual cruelty of people who saw her as less than human. "I'm sure," she said. "Good. Then let's talk about Phase 2. Phase 2, Andre explained, involves something far more personal than legal notices and financial manipulation. It involved Mariah herself making a public appearance, showing the world she wasn't defeated, wasn't hiding, wasn't ashamed. I want you to attend a charity gala next month, one that Victoria traditionally hosts, but that I've arranged to take over this year. She doesn't know yet. The announcement goes out tomorrow. You want me to show up pregnant at a gala Victoria thinks she's running? I want you to show up glowing and confident at a gala I'm hosting in your honor. All the same society people will be there. All the same influential families. But instead of being the rejected wife who disappeared, you'll be my sister, the guest of honor, the woman everyone wants to meet because they're suddenly aware I'm one of the wealthiest men in the country, and you're my only family. The implications were staggering. They'll know who I am. They'll talk. Oh, they'll talk. They'll talk about how Victoria Hawthorne threw out her pregnant daughter-in-law, who turned out to be connected to the Collins fortune. They'll talk about Gregory's cruelty. They'll talk about their financial troubles. And they'll do it at a party celebrating you, while the Hawthornes stand in the corner realizing their social standing just evaporated. Have you ever imagined the moment your enemies realize they've made a catastrophic mistake? The weeks that followed were a blur of preparation. Mariah worked with a stylist who helped her choose clothing that celebrated her pregnancy rather than hiding it. She met with a speaking coach who taught her how to command a room with quiet confidence. She practiced answering questions about her situation with grace and dignity that would make any attempts to shame her backfire spectacularly. The twins grew stronger. So did she. One evening, reviewing notes for potential questions she might face at the gala, Mariah caught her reflection in the mirror. The woman staring back wasn't the broken, desperate person who had stumbled through the rain 8 weeks ago. This woman had steel in her spine, fire in her eyes, and the absolute certainty that she would not be defeated. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Hello. Silence. Then Gregory's voice, cold and threatening. I got your legal notice. Mariah, I don't know what game you're playing, but it needs to stop. Now. Her heart pounded, but her voice remained steady. It's not a game, Gregory. It's consequences. You have no idea who you're dealing with. My mother will destroy you. We have resources, power, connections. You have debt, Mariah interrupted. You have lies. You have a pattern of destroying women that's about to become very public. And you have 30 days before those debts I mentioned come due. How's your cash flow? The silence on the other end was delicious. Who's feeding you this information? Who's helping you? Someone who actually loves me. Someone who sees me as family, not garbage. Something you'll never understand. She hung up before he could respond, her hands shaking, but her resolve absolute. Andre, who had been listening from across the room, nodded approvingly. Perfect. Calm, confident, devastating. That's exactly the energy you need. He sounded scared, Mariah said, surprised. He should be. He just realized the woman he threw away has teeth. Now let's make sure everyone else realizes it too. The stage was set. The pieces were moving into place. And Mariah, for the first time in her marriage, felt like she was exactly where she belonged, not in the shadows, not begging for acceptance, but standing in her own power, ready to reclaim everything they had tried to take from her. The calm before the storm was ending. The retribution was about to begin. The morning sun cut through the estate gates like a blade, glinting off iron and stone with a brightness that felt almost prophetic. Inside the Hawthorne mansion, Gregory stood in the sunroom with Lila draped across the sofa, her laughter sharp and frequent as she showed him photos from their engagement party on her phone. Look at Margaret's face when we announced the wedding date, Lila said, zooming in on a woman's surprised expression. She had no idea we'd move this fast. Gregory smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Something had been nagging at him since that phone call from Mariah 2 weeks ago. The legal notice. The confidence in her voice. The way she'd mentioned debts like she knew something he didn't. Victoria entered carrying coffee, her expression sour despite the sunshine. The accountant called again. 3rd time this week. Something about cash flow issues and creditors requesting meetings. Tell him I'll call back, Gregory said dismissively. I've been telling him that for a month. He's insistent. Then fire him and get someone less insistent. Victoria's jaw tightened. Gregory, perhaps you should actually speak with him. Some of what he's saying sounds, Mother, please. We're celebrating. Can the doom and gloom wait until after the wedding? Lila laughed, lifting her champagne glass. Exactly. Why worry about money when there's always more money? But there wasn't always more money, and Victoria knew it even if her son refused to acknowledge reality. The estate was bleeding cash, the investments were failing, and creditors were circling like sharks. Still, she forced a smile and raised her own glass, determined to maintain appearances. That's when they heard it. The sound started soft, distant, like thunder that hadn't quite decided to commit to a storm. Then it grew louder, closer, unmistakable. The deep, throaty purr of an engine that cost more than most people earned in a lifetime. Gregory frowned. Are we expecting someone? Victoria checked her phone. No one. The staff would have notified me. They moved to the window, all three of them, drawn by curiosity and something else, something that felt uncomfortably like premonition. The black Rolls-Royce Phantom rolled up the driveway with the unhurried confidence of absolute power. Sunlight gleamed off its perfect paint job, every chrome detail catching the light like jewelry. The car moved slowly, deliberately, as if its arrival was a message in itself. Who drives a Rolls-Royce at 9 in the morning? Lila muttered, though her voice carried an edge of nervousness. The car stopped directly in front of the main entrance, positioned where everyone inside could see it clearly. For a moment, nothing happened. The engine idled, that distinctive purr filling the morning air, and the tinted windows revealed nothing of who sat inside. Then the driver's door opened. A man stepped out, tall and impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost what Gregory spent on his car. He moved around the vehicle with practiced precision, opening the rear passenger door with the ceremony usually reserved for royalty. Andre emerged first, and even from a distance, his presence commanded attention. He straightened his cuffs, surveyed the estate with cool assessment, then reached back into the car. His hand emerged holding someone else's, gentle but protective, and Mariah stepped into the sunlight. Gregory's champagne glass slipped from his fingers, shattering on the marble floor. Lila gasped. Victoria went pale, gripping the windowsill like it was the only thing keeping her upright. Because the woman standing beside that Rolls-Royce wasn't the broken, desperate creature they'd thrown out in the rain. This woman wore an elegant dress that celebrated her pregnancy rather than hiding it, her hair styled perfectly, her posture radiating quiet confidence. She held 2 infants in her arms, the twins, Gregory realized with a jolt, and she looked directly at the mansion with eyes that held no fear, no shame, only absolute certainty of her own worth. Is that? Lila couldn't finish the sentence. Mariah, Victoria whispered, the name tasting like poison. That's impossible. She had nothing. She was nothing. Andre said something to Mariah, and she smiled, the expression so serene it looked almost dangerous. Then they began walking toward the entrance, their steps measured and unhurried, like they owned the very ground beneath their feet. Gregory found his voice. Call security. Get them out of here. Now. But Victoria's hand on his arm stopped him. Wait. Look at that car. Look at how they're dressed. Look at. She stopped, recognition dawning with horrifying clarity. Oh God. I know who he is. Who? Andre Collins. The tech billionaire. I saw him in Forbes last month. They said he's worth. She couldn't say the number. It was too large, too impossible, too threatening to everything she understood about power and hierarchy. How is he connected to Mariah? Gregory demanded. He's her brother, Victoria breathed. Her brother is Andre Collins. The implications hit like a freight train. Every dismissal, every insult, every act of cruelty they had inflicted on Mariah suddenly took on catastrophic dimensions. They hadn't just thrown out some nobody. They had thrown out a billionaire sister. Downstairs, the doorbell rang. Not a polite request for entry, but a statement. 3 solid chimes that echoed through the entire mansion. The staff, who had gathered near the windows to watch the spectacle, looked at each other uncertainly. No one moved to answer. The bell rang again. Should someone? One of the maids started. Stay where you are, Victoria snapped, hurrying down the stairs with Gregory and Lila close behind. She reached the door, smoothed her hair, arranged her face into an expression of cold authority, and opened it. Andre stood on the threshold holding one of the twins while Mariah held the other, and the sight of the babies, Gregory's children, undeniably his with their eyes and features, made the situation undeniably real. "Victoria Hawthorne," Andre said, his voice pleasant but carrying an undertone of steel. "We haven't been formally introduced. I'm Andre Collins, Mariah's brother. We need to talk." Victoria's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Gregory pushed past her. "You need to leave. Both of you. You're not welcome here." "Not welcome." Andre's eyebrow lifted. "Interesting. You throw my sister out pregnant in a storm, call her children mistakes, humiliate her in ways that should be criminal, and somehow we're not welcome? The irony is remarkable." Mariah's voice, when she spoke, was calm and clear. "Hello, Gregory. You look well. Recovered from the shock of learning your annulment was denied, I hope." Gregory's face flushed. "That's temporary. My lawyers will fix it." "Your lawyers?" Andre said with amusement. "Yes, about them. Funny thing, they work for a firm I acquired last month. Everything they know about your case, I know. Every strategy, every lie, every attempt to paint my sister as fraudulent. It's been fascinating reading." The color drained from Gregory's face. Behind him, neighbors had started to gather at their gates, phones out, clearly filming the confrontation. The Hawthorne estate had always been a source of gossip, but nothing like this had ever happened before. A billionaire showing up with a Rolls-Royce and a sister who'd been cast out? This was scandal gold. "What do you want?" Victoria demanded, trying to regain control of the situation. "Money? Is this blackmail?" Mariah laughed, the sound startling everyone. "Blackmail? We don't need your money, Victoria. Andre has more money than your family will see in 10 generations. What we want is something much simpler." "What?" "Acknowledgement," Andre said. "Public acknowledgement that these children are Gregory's, that Mariah was wrongfully accused and thrown out, and that this family owes her an apology." "Absolutely not," Victoria spat. "We'll do no such thing." "Then we'll do this the hard way." Andre handed his twin to Mariah, who somehow managed to hold both babies with practiced ease, then pulled an envelope from his jacket. "These are foreclosure notices for the estate. Turns out I own your mortgages, all 3 of them. You have 30 days to pay $27 million, or the property transfers to my sister." "Oh, and that's just the beginning. Your son's company? I own the majority shares through shell corporations. The cars, the jewelry, the art collection you're so proud of, all purchased on credit I now control. In 30 days, everything you think you own will belong to Mariah. Everything except your reputation, which is being destroyed as we speak by everyone filming this conversation." He gestured to the growing crowd of neighbors. Victoria's knees buckled. Gregory caught her, his face a mask of disbelief and rage. Lila stood frozen, her earlier confidence completely evaporated. "You can't do this," Gregory said, but his voice lacked conviction. "I already did it. The only question now is whether you do this with dignity or whether we drag every piece of your family's dirty laundry into public court. And trust me, we have a lot of laundry. 3 previous wives your mother made disappear, for starters. Want to explain that pattern to the press? Can you imagine the moment you realize you've destroyed yourself?" Mariah shifted the twins, both babies quiet and content despite the tension. "You called them mistakes, Gregory. You said I was never part of this family. You threw me out with nothing and never looked back. Did you think there would be no consequences? Did you think I'd just disappear like the others?" "The others were paid to disappear," Victoria said coldly. "They took the money and ran. That was the deal." "The deal," Andre repeated. "You mean the blackmail, the threats, the destruction of their lives. Yes, we know about the deals. We know everything. And unlike them, Mariah isn't taking money to stay quiet. She's taking everything and telling everyone." Gregory lunged forward, rage overwhelming. "You gold digging," he didn't finish. Andre's hand shot out, gripping Gregory's wrist with enough force to make him gasp. "Touch my sister, and you'll discover that money isn't my only form of power. Do you understand me?" Gregory nodded, pain clear in his eyes. Andre released him. Good. Now, you have 30 days to figure out how to pay your debts. I suggest you start selling things. Maybe that engagement ring Lila's wearing. Oh wait, that's also purchased on credit I own. Never mind. He turned to Mariah. Ready. She looked at the mansion one last time, at the place where she'd tried so hard to belong, where she'd been systematically destroyed, where she'd lost everything she thought mattered. And she felt nothing but relief that she'd never have to belong here again. I'm ready. They walked back to the Rolls-Royce, Andre opening the door for her with the same careful ceremony, helping her settle the twins into car seats that were obviously custom installed. The driver closed the door behind them, and the car began to pull away. Through the window, Mariah watched the Hawthorns standing frozen on their doorstep, Victoria's face white with shock, Gregory's twisted with impotent rage, Lila's calculating, as she probably wondered whether she'd bet on the wrong horse. The neighbors continued filming. The staff watched from windows. And the whole scene had the feeling of an ending, of a door closing on one life and opening to another. How do you feel? Andre asked quietly. Mariah looked down at her sleeping twins, then back at the estate disappearing behind them. Free, she said. I feel free. The Rolls-Royce turned onto the main road, its engine purring with satisfaction, carrying Mariah away from everything that had tried to destroy her and toward everything she was about to become. Behind them, the Hawthorns stood in the ruins of their arrogance, just beginning to understand the magnitude of their mistake. The charity luncheon was Victoria's idea, a desperate attempt to control the narrative that had been spiraling since the Rolls-Royce arrival 3 days ago. She had called it under the guise of normalcy, inviting the usual circle of society families to the estate, determined to prove that the Hawthorns remained untouchable despite the rumors flooding through their social circles. What she didn't know was that Andre had orchestrated every detail. The guest list she thought she controlled included people he had personally contacted, journalists disguised as socialites, and witnesses who would ensure that whatever happened today would be documented and spread through every channel that mattered. Mariah sat in the Rolls-Royce outside the estate gates, the twins sleeping peacefully in their car seats beside her. She wore a cream dress that cost more than her entire previous wardrobe, her hair swept up elegantly, her makeup subtle but flawless. She looked like money. She looked like power. She looked like everything Victoria had tried to convince her she could never be. Last chance to back out, Andre said from the driver's seat. We can turn around right now, handle this through lawyers and proxies, and you never have to face them again. Mariah's hand touched the necklace Andre had given her that morning, diamonds that had belonged to their mother, a connection to a family that actually loved her. No, I need to do this. They need to see my face when their world collapses. Andre nodded, pressing a button that opened the gates. They rolled through slowly, deliberately, giving everyone inside time to notice their arrival. Through the windows, Mariah could see the party in full swing on the back lawn. White tents, waiters carrying champagne, women in designer dresses, and men in expensive suits. The elite gathered to celebrate themselves, unaware that the guest of honor had just arrived. The car stopped at the front entrance. Andre helped Mariah out while a nanny he'd hired took charge of the twins, carrying them to a secure location inside where they would be safe and comfortable, but close if needed. Mariah's heels clicked against marble as they entered through the front door, and she felt like she was walking into battle. Which, in a way, she was. The staff recognized her immediately. A maid dropped a tray, the crash echoing through the foyer. A butler went pale. But none of them moved to stop her because standing beside her was Andre Collins, and everyone knew exactly who he was now. Word had spread. The gossip had been vicious and constant. And now here they were, walking into Victoria's sanctuary like they owned it. Which, technically, they almost did. They moved through the house toward the back lawn, passing photographs of Hawthorne ancestors who stared down from the walls with disapproval. Mariah had once felt judged by those faces. Now she felt nothing but pity for people trapped in frames, their legacies crumbling along with their descendants' empire. The moment they stepped onto the lawn, conversation stopped. Not immediately, but in waves, like dominoes falling. People turned, saw Mariah, saw Andre, and the whispers started. Is that? It can't be. Oh my God, it's her. Victoria stood near the center tent, mid-sentence in some story, and her words died when she saw them. Gregory, holding a champagne glass and standing too close to Lila, froze like he'd been turned to stone. Lila's confident smile flickered and died. Andre's voice carried across the lawn, pleasant and clear. Victoria, thank you for the invitation. So thoughtful of you to include family. It was a lie. They hadn't been invited. But the beauty of it was that Victoria couldn't contradict him without admitting she'd excluded her son's wife and children from a family event, which would only make her look worse. Victoria's mouth opened, closed, then forced itself into something resembling a smile. Mariah, Andre, what a surprise. I hope we're not intruding, Mariah said, her voice carrying that same pleasant tone that somehow made everything more threatening. We know how important these gatherings are to you. All your friends, all your reputation, all on display. The bar landed. Mariah could see it in the way Victoria's jaw tightened, the way Gregory's hands clenched around his glass. Lila tried to slip away toward the house, but Andre's voice stopped her. Lila, don't leave it on our account. I think you'll want to hear what comes next. A woman Mariah recognized as Catherine Sterling, one of Victoria's closest friends and biggest gossip, stepped forward with poorly disguised curiosity. Mariah, we heard you'd been unwell. Something about complications with your pregnancy. It was a trap, an attempt to force Mariah into either lying or admitting she'd been thrown out. Instead, Mariah smiled. I was unwell, yes. Turns out being homeless and 8 months pregnant with twins while your husband and his mother call your children mistakes can be stressful. Who knew? Gasps rippled through the crowd. Catherine's eyes went wide. Other guests pulled out their phones, no longer pretending they weren't recording. That's not, Gregory started, but Andre cut him off. Not what? Not true? We have documentation. Witness statements. Video footage of you throwing her out in a storm. Would you like us to show everyone? I brought copies. He pulled a tablet from his jacket pocket, and suddenly the crowd pressed closer, hungry for scandal. Have you ever watched someone's carefully constructed image shatter in real time? This is inappropriate, Victoria said, her voice sharp with panic. This is a private event. Private. Andre glanced around at the phones filming, the journalists taking notes, the guests who were clearly savoring every second. Seems pretty public to me. But fine, let's talk privately. You, me, Gregory, and Mariah. Right now. Everyone else can enjoy the party. He turned to the crowd. There's an excellent champagne selection. Help yourselves. We'll be right back. Victoria had no choice but to follow as Andre led them into the house, Mariah beside him, Gregory and Lila trailing behind like condemned prisoners. They gathered in the study, the same room where Mariah had once been interrogated and dismissed. Now she stood in the center while they positioned themselves around her like they were still in control. What do you want? Gregory demanded. We already told you. You told us what you were willing to give, Andre interrupted. We're here to tell you what we're taking. He set the tablet on the desk, pulling up documents. Your annulment was denied 3 days ago. Official court ruling. Mariah is legally your wife, Gregory, and those twins are legally your heirs. Which means all your debts are marital property, and she's entitled to half of everything. Unfortunately for you, half of everything is actually half of nothing, since you're $27 million in debt. Gregory's face went purple. My lawyer said, your lawyers work for me. I thought we covered this. Andre swiped to another document. But here's where it gets interesting. Victoria, you've been committing fraud for years. Moving money between accounts to hide losses, forging documents to maintain credit, even stealing from your own son's company to maintain your lifestyle. It's all here. Every transaction, every lie, every crime. Victoria's confidence finally cracked. You can't prove. I can prove all of it. And I will, unless you do exactly what I say right now. The silence was absolute. Even Lila seemed to understand that the ground had shifted permanently. What do you want? Victoria asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Mariah spoke before Andre could answer. I want you to admit what you did. Out there, in front of everyone, I want you to admit you threw me out, call my children mistakes, try to destroy me, and that you were wrong. Never, Victoria spat. I'll never give you that satisfaction. Then I'll take the estate instead, Mariah said calmly. The foreclosure paperwork is ready. One signature from Andre, and this house, these grounds, every brick and painting and piece of silver, it all becomes mine. Your family home for 6 generations will belong to the woman you call trash. Is that really preferable to an apology? The calculation played across Victoria's face. She was weighing options, looking for escapes, trying to find some angle that let her keep her pride and her property. But there was none. Andre had made sure of it. If I apologize, Victoria said slowly, what happens to the debt? The estate debt gets restructured on terms you can actually manage, Andre said. The fraud charges disappear. You get to keep living here, though technically Mariah will own it. You'll pay rent. Fair market rent, not some sweetheart deal. And you'll do it while being publicly polite to your daughter-in-law and grandchildren. And if I refuse, then we go nuclear. Court cases, press coverage, criminal investigations. Every dirty secret your family has hidden for decades gets exposed. By the time we're done, the Hawthorne name will be synonymous with fraud, cruelty, and failure. Your choice. Gregory looked at his mother, and for the first time, Mariah saw something other than submission in his eyes. He was angry at Victoria, realizing that her pride had put them in this position, that her need to prove her superiority had destroyed everything. Just do it, he said quietly. Apologize. It's over. We lost. Gregory, we lost, Mother. She won. Can't you see that? Victoria's face twisted with rage and humiliation. But she was cornered, and she knew it. They all knew it. Andre checked his watch. The guests are waiting. Shall we? They walked back outside, the 4 of them plus Mariah, and the party chatter died instantly. Everyone sensed something was about to happen, something they'd be talking about for years. Victoria stood at the center of the lawn, and the crowd pressed closer, phones raised, capturing every second. Her voice, when she spoke, was tight with suppressed fury. I have an announcement. It's come to my attention that there were misunderstandings regarding my daughter-in-law Mariah. Things were said and done that were inappropriate. The twins she bore are Gregory's children and rightful members of this family. Any suggestion otherwise was incorrect. The words were clearly painful, each one dragged out against her will. But it wasn't enough. Not for Mariah. And Mariah prompted, her voice carrying across the silent lawn. Victoria's jaw clenched. And I apologize for any distress caused. For throwing me out pregnant in a storm? For calling my children mistakes? For treating me like garbage for months? Be specific, Victoria. The crowd was loving this. Phones recorded every second. This would be online within the hour, spreading across every social media platform, becoming the scandal of the season. Yes, Victoria ground out. For all of it, I apologize. Mariah nodded, then turned to Gregory. And you? Nothing to say. Gregory looked at her, and something in his expression might have been regret, or it might have been resentment that he'd been caught. I'm sorry, Mariah. I should have protected you. I didn't. It wasn't much. It wasn't enough. But it was public, it was recorded, and it would follow him forever. Lila, Mariah said, turning to the woman who had smiled while she was thrown out. Any thoughts? Lila said nothing, her face pale, her confidence completely shattered. Andre stepped forward. Well, this has been enlightening. Mariah, shall we go? The twins are probably getting hungry. Mariah took one last look at the Hawthorns, Victoria seething, Gregory broken, Lila calculating her escape, and felt nothing but closure. Yes, let's go home. They walked back through the crowd, which parted like the Red Sea, guests whispering and filming and already texting friends about what they'd witnessed. Catherine Sterling caught Mariah's arm as she passed. That was the bravest thing I've ever seen, she whispered. Thank you, Mariah said. In the car, twins secured and already fussing for their next feeding. Andre glanced at her. How do you feel? Mariah thought about it. She'd gotten her apology, her public acknowledgement, her moment of vindication. The people who had destroyed her had been forced to admit their cruelty in front of everyone who mattered to them. Satisfied, she said. Not happy, not triumphant, just satisfied. Is that wrong? It's human. Revenge doesn't make you whole, but justice helps. And that was justice. As they drove away from the estate for what Mariah suspected might be the last time she'd need to visit, she looked back through the rear window. The party had dissolved into chaos, guests clustering in groups, phones out, everyone talking at once. The Hawthorns stood alone in the center of it all, isolated by their own cruelty, surrounded by witnesses to their downfall. Tomorrow, this will be everywhere. Next week, they'd be social pariahs. Next month, they'll be fighting in court. And through it all, Mariah would be building a life with her children, supported by a brother who had proven that family meant protection, not destruction. The public humiliation was complete. But Andre was right. This was just the beginning. The courtroom felt like a cathedral of judgment, all dark wood and solemn authority, where the weight of law pressed down on everyone who entered. Mariah sat beside Andre and their team of lawyers, 6 of them, each a specialist in their field, each paid more per hour than most people earned in a month. Across the aisle, Gregory sat with Victoria and a single attorney who looked increasingly uncomfortable as documents were presented, as evidence piled up, as the reality of their situation became undeniable. The judge, a woman in her 60s named Patricia Morrison, with a reputation for zero tolerance for deception, reviewed the files with an expression that gave nothing away. But Mariah had learned to read rooms, to sense shifts in power, and she knew before anyone spoke that this would not go well for the Hawthorns. Judge Morrison looked up, her gaze settling on Gregory's lawyer. Counselor Hayes, your petition for annulment claims fraud on the part of Mrs. Hawthorne, specifically that she misrepresented her background and intentions. Do you have evidence to support these claims? Hayes stood, shuffling papers with hands that trembled slightly. Your Honor, we have testimony from family members stating that Mrs. Hawthorne deliberately sought out Mr. Hawthorne for financial gain, that she... Testimony from family members. Judge Morrison interrupted. You mean from Mr. Hawthorne's mother, who has a documented history of interfering in her son's relationships. That testimony. Hayes faltered. Well, yes, but... And do you have any evidence that doesn't come from biased sources? Bank records showing unusual transactions? Communications proving premeditation? Anything objective? The silence stretched. Hayes looked at Gregory, who stared at the table. Victoria's face had gone rigid with fury, but she said nothing because she had nothing to say. I'll take that as a no, Judge Morrison said. Mr. Keller, I assume you have a response. Andre's lead attorney, a man named Richard Keller, who had argued cases before the Supreme Court, stood with the calm of someone who knew he'd already won. Your Honor, we have extensive evidence that directly contradicts every claim made by the petitioner. Mrs. Hawthorne entered the marriage in good faith, brought no demands for prenuptial agreements, and asked for nothing beyond what any wife would expect, basic respect and partnership. What she received instead was systematic abuse. He placed a tablet on the table facing the judge, pulling up images. These are hospital records from the night Mrs. Hawthorne was thrown out while 8 months pregnant. Severe dehydration, stress-induced contractions, psychological trauma. The attending physician's notes specifically mention that she reported being forced to leave her home without shelter, money, or resources. Judge Morrison studied the records, her expression hardening. And when did this occur, Mr. Keller? 3 months ago, Your Honor. Mr. Hawthorne and his mother physically removed her from the estate during a severe storm, with full knowledge that she was carrying twins and had no place to go. Gregory's lawyer stood quickly. Your Honor, that's not. There were circumstances. What circumstances justify throwing a pregnant woman into a storm? Judge Morrison's voice cut like ice. Hayes opened his mouth, closed it, and looked desperately at Gregory for guidance. But Gregory had nothing. No explanation that wouldn't make him look worse. No justification that a judge or jury would accept. Your Honor, Keller continued, we also have documentation of a pattern. Mr. Hawthorne has been married 3 times before this union. Each marriage ended in annulment or quiet divorce. Each wife came from modest means. Each was disposed of once she became inconvenient. We have testimony from 2 of the previous wives willing to describe identical treatment. Promises of love followed. By systematic humiliation, isolation, and eventual expulsion. Victoria shot to her feet. That's irrelevant. Those were different situations, Mrs. Hawthorne Sr. You will sit down and remain silent unless called to testify, Judge Morrison said, her tone brooking no argument. Victoria sat, but her hands clenched the armrest, so hard her knuckles went white. Furthermore, Keller said, warming to his theme, we have evidence that the Hawthorne family has engaged in fraud to hide their financial situation. Mrs. Victoria Hawthorne has been moving funds illegally, forging documents, and misrepresenting assets to maintain credit. The estate Mr. Hawthorne claims, as his inheritance, is actually mortgaged beyond its value, and the family fortune is essentially non-existent. He pulled out another stack of documents, each one more damning than the last. Bank records showing unauthorized transfers. Loan applications with falsified income statements. Credit cards maxed out and hidden from creditors. The family that threw out my client for supposedly being a gold digger is, in fact, broke and surviving on fraud. Can you imagine the moment when all your lies catch up to you at once? Judge Morrison examined the evidence with meticulous care, her expression growing colder with each page. Finally, she set the documents down and looked directly at Gregory. Mr. Hawthorne, stand up. Gregory stood, his face pale, his confidence from months ago completely evaporated. You came into my courtroom claiming your wife defrauded you, when in fact the evidence shows you and your family systematically abused, humiliated, and abandoned her while she was carrying your children. You lied on legal documents. You misrepresented your financial situation. You attempted to annul a legitimate marriage to escape responsibility for your own actions. Is there anything you'd like to say in your defense? Gregory's mouth opened, but no words came out. What could he say? Every accusation was true, every piece of evidence legitimate. He had been caught completely, and there was no escape. I didn't think so, Judge Morrison said. Petition for annulment denied. Furthermore, I'm granting Mrs. Hawthorne's counterpetition for legal separation with full custody of the minor children and financial support. She turned to Victoria. Mrs. Hawthorne Sr., based on the evidence of fraud presented here today, I'm referring this matter to the district attorney for criminal investigation. You may face charges of bank fraud, wire fraud, and falsification of documents. I suggest you retain competent legal counsel immediately. Victoria's face went from white to red to purple, rage and humiliation warring for dominance. You can't do this. We have rights. You have the right to remain silent, which I strongly suggest you exercise, Judge Morrison said. As for the financial obligations, Mr. Hawthorne, you are hereby ordered to pay child support in the amount of, she consulted her notes, $12,000 per month for both children, with provisions for medical care, education, and all reasonable expenses. Mrs. Hawthorne also retains the right to 50% of all marital assets, which based on the documentation here means she's entitled to half of your debt. Gregory's lawyer finally found his voice. Your Honor, my client cannot possibly pay $12,000 a month. He doesn't have. Then he should have thought of that before having children and abandoning them, Judge Morrison said sharply. The amount is based on his income and lifestyle. If that representation was fraudulent, that's his problem, not the court's. She signed several documents with decisive strokes. Additionally, the Hawthorne estate will remain under court supervision until all debts are resolved. Mrs. Mariah Hawthorne is granted first right of purchase should the property go to foreclosure, at fair market value, less any amounts owed to her in child support. It was everything. Complete victory. Total vindication. Mariah sat still, barely breathing, as the judge's words reshaped reality around her. Keller leaned over and whispered, "We won. Everything we asked for, and more." The gavel came down. This court is adjourned. Gregory slumped in his chair like someone had cut his strings. Victoria stood frozen, her world crumbling around her in real time. Their lawyer gathered papers with shaking hands, already calculating how to distance himself from clients who had just been destroyed in open court. Mariah stood, Andre's hand on her shoulder, steadying her. "How do you feel?" he asked quietly. "Like I can breathe for the first time in a year." Outside the courtroom, reporters swarmed. Cameras flashed. Questions flew from every direction. "Mrs. Hawthorne, how does it feel to win against one of society's oldest families?" "Mariah, will you be moving into the estate? What message do you have for other women in similar situations?" Keller had prepared her for this, coached her on what to say, how to handle the attention. But in the moment, with everything fresh and raw, Mariah spoke from her heart. "I didn't come here for revenge. I came here for my children, so they would know their mother fought for them, that she didn't just accept cruelty and humiliation. I came here because no woman should be thrown away like garbage for the crime of loving someone who didn't deserve it. And I came here to prove that money and status don't make you untouchable. Actions have consequences. And today the Hawthorns learned that lesson." The reporters ate it up, scribbling notes and recording every word. This would be on every news outlet by evening, every social media platform by midnight. The downfall of the Hawthorns would be complete and public and permanent. As they pushed through the crowd toward the waiting car, Gregory emerged from the courthouse with Victoria. For a moment, their eyes met, Mariah and the man who had promised to love her forever then destroyed her without hesitation. She expected to feel triumph. Instead, she felt nothing. He was a stranger now, someone whose opinion didn't matter, whose presence didn't affect her. He had no power anymore. None at all. Gregory seemed to realize it too. His shoulders sagged, his face hollow with defeat. Victoria tried to pull him away, already barking orders into her phone about appeals and lawyers and strategies that would never work. But Gregory stayed a moment longer, looking at Mariah. "I really did love you once," he said quietly, just loud enough for her to hear. "I know," Mariah replied. "But love without strength is just weakness with a prettier name. And I deserved better." She got in the car with Andre, leaving Gregory standing on the courthouse steps, a man who had everything and threw it away for pride and cruelty and his mother's approval. The Rolls-Royce pulled away smoothly, and Mariah watched the courthouse shrink in the mirror. "What happens next?" she asked. "Next, the district attorney files criminal charges against Victoria. Next, the estate goes into foreclosure proceedings. Next, Gregory's company collapses because nobody will do business with a man convicted of fraud and abandonment in such a public manner. Next, Lila quietly disappears because she's smart enough to know she bet on a losing horse." Andre glanced at her. "And next, you decide what kind of life you want to build. The legal battle is over. Now comes the hard part, figuring out who you are after all this." Mariah looked down at her hands, at the wedding ring she'd finally removed that morning before court. She'd carried it in her pocket. During the proceedings, a reminder of what she was fighting for and what she was leaving behind. Now she rolled down the window and tossed it out, watching it disappear into traffic. One more piece of the past left on the roadside. "I'm a mother," she said. "I'm a sister. I'm a survivor. That's enough for now." "That's more than enough," Andre agreed. The twins were waiting at the safe house with Helen, both of them awake and fussy, demanding attention and food and the constant care that infants required. Mariah scooped them up, one in each arm, feeling their weight and warmth and absolute dependence. They didn't care about court victories or financial settlements or public humiliation. They just cared that she was there, that she was present, that she loved them unconditionally. "Your father lost everything today," she whispered to them. "Not because of me, but because of his own choices. Remember that when you're older. Remember that cruelty always has a price, and someday that bill comes due." That night, after the twins were asleep and the house was quiet, Mariah stood at the window looking out at the city lights. Her phone buzzed constantly with messages. Congratulations from people she barely knew, interview requests from magazines and shows, even a few apologies from society women who had watched her humiliation and done nothing. She ignored them all. Tomorrow she would figure out what came next. Tomorrow she would start planning her future, deciding whether to buy the estate or let it go, whether to stay in this city or move somewhere fresh and unburdened by memory. Tomorrow she would be practical and strategic and all the things she'd learned to be. But tonight, she allowed herself to simply feel victorious, to acknowledge that she had walked into hell and come out stronger, that she had faced people who tried to break her and refused to stay broken. Have you ever won a battle you thought you'd already lost? The legal avalanche had buried the Hawthorns completely, and Mariah stood above it all, unscathed and unshakable, ready for whatever came next. The criminal charges against Victoria Hawthorne hit the news exactly 1 week after the court ruling, and the media frenzy was immediate and merciless. Every network ran the story. Every paper printed headlines about society's fall from grace. Every social media platform exploded with commentary about privilege, fraud, and the lies wealthy families told to maintain their status. Mariah watched it unfold from the safety of Andre's penthouse, the twins playing on a blanket beside her while the television cycled through coverage. Former socialite Victoria Hawthorne faces 17 counts of bank fraud, wire fraud, and falsification of documents. If convicted, she could face up to 20 years in federal prison. The reporter's voice was appropriately grave, but Mariah could hear the undercurrent of satisfaction. People loved watching the powerful fall, especially when they fell spectacularly. Andre sat across from her, his laptop open, monitoring multiple news feeds simultaneously. The district attorney is being thorough. They've frozen all Hawthorne accounts, seized documents, and they're interviewing every bank, creditor, and business associate Victoria dealt with over the last decade. How long until trial? Mariah asked. 6 months, maybe a year. White-collar crime moves slowly, but the damage is already done. Whether she's convicted or not, the Hawthorne name is destroyed. He paused. There's something else you should know. The tone made Mariah look up. What? Lila Patterson filed for bankruptcy yesterday. Turns out she was living entirely on credit, betting that marrying Gregory would solve her financial problems. Now that he's broke and radioactive, her creditors are coming for everything. Mariah should have felt satisfaction, but instead she felt something closer to pity. What will she do? Probably move somewhere quiet and rebuild under a different name. That's what people like her do when their schemes collapse. Andre closed the laptop. But that's not why I'm telling you this. I'm telling you because you need to decide how far you want to take this. The legal victory is done. Victoria's facing prison. Gregory's broke and unemployable. Lila's finished. You won, Mariah. Completely. The question is whether you want to keep pushing or start building your own life. It was the question she'd been avoiding for days. How much revenge was enough? When did justice become cruelty? When did protecting her children become simply punishing their father? I don't know, she admitted. Part of me wants to watch them suffer forever. Part of me just wants to move on and forget they exist. Both are valid, Andre said. But you can't do both. You need to choose. That afternoon, an unexpected visitor arrived. The security guard called up, his voice uncertain. Ma'am, there's a woman here named Catherine Sterling. Says she knows you from the estate. Should I send her away? Catherine, Victoria's friend or former friend, who had been at the luncheon where everything exploded. Mariah hesitated. Then curiosity won. Send her up. Catherine looked smaller than Mariah remembered, less polished, like the events of the past weeks had diminished her somehow. She stood in the penthouse doorway, clutching her purse like a shield. Thank you for seeing me. I wasn't sure you would. I'm not sure why I did, Mariah said honestly. What do you want? To apologize. And to tell you something you need to hear. She glanced at Andre, who nodded and left the room, giving them privacy. Catherine sat carefully on the edge of the sofa, her hands twisting together. I've known Victoria for 20 years. I've watched her destroy 3 women before you, watched her manipulate Gregory, watched her build this empire of cruelty, and called it tradition. And I said nothing. I did nothing. I was complicit because it was easier to stay in her good graces than to stand up for what was right. Mariah said nothing, waiting. When I saw you at that luncheon, when I watched you face them down with such dignity despite everything they'd done to you, something broke in me. I realized I'd spent 2 decades being a coward, protecting my status, instead of doing what was decent. So, I went to the district attorney. I gave them everything I had, conversations Victoria had with me about hiding money, documents she'd shown me about the fraud, testimony about what she did to the other wives. I'm one of the reasons she's facing charges now. The confession hung in the air. Mariah studied Catherine, looking for deception, for ulterior motives. But all she saw was guilt and exhaustion. Why are you telling me this? Because you deserve to know that not everyone is against you. That some of us, even if we were too weak to help when it mattered, at least tried to make it right afterward. And because Catherine's voice broke. Because my daughter is getting married next year, and I keep thinking about what I'd want someone to do if her husband's family treated her the way the Hawthorns treated you. I'd want someone to fight for her. So I'm fighting for you, even though it's too late. Tears burned Mariah's eyes, unexpected and overwhelming. It's not too late. Your testimony helped convict them. That matters. Does it? Does it make up for the months I watched you suffer and said nothing? No, Mariah said honestly. But it's something. It's more than most people did. Catherine stood, composing herself. There's one more thing. The other wives, the ones before you, I've been in contact with them. They want to meet you. They want to tell their stories publicly, to add their voices to yours, to make sure Victoria never does this to anyone else. Would you be willing to speak with them? Mariah thought about it. 3 other women, 3 other victims of the same pattern of cruelty. Their combined testimony could seal Victoria's conviction, could ensure that even if she avoided prison, her reputation would never recover. Yes, she said. Set it up. The meeting happened 2 days later in a private room at Andre's office building. The 3 women arrived separately, each one nervous, each one carrying the weight of their own trauma. Sarah had been first, married to Gregory 15 years ago, when she was 23. I thought I was so lucky, she said, her voice soft. This wealthy, charming man who swept me off my feet. Within 3 months of the wedding, Victoria was calling me stupid in front of staff, and Gregory was spending nights with other women. When I got pregnant, Victoria told him to get rid of me. He did. Paid me $50,000 and made me sign papers saying I'd never speak about the marriage or the baby. You had a child? Mariah asked, shocked. Sarah nodded, tears streaming. A boy. Gregory never met him. Never paid $1 of support beyond that initial payment. My son is 14 now, and he asks about his father sometimes. What do I tell him? That his father threw us away like garbage because his grandmother decided we weren't good enough. Jennifer was next, married to Gregory 8 years ago. Her story was eerily similar. Quick courtship, immediate rejection by Victoria, systematic humiliation, eventual expulsion. But Jennifer had fought back, hiring lawyers, demanding alimony. They destroyed me in court, brought witnesses who lied about me cheating, produced documents I'd never seen claiming I'd signed away all rights to anything. My lawyer told me to take the settlement and run, that fighting the Hawthorns was career suicide for any attorney who tried. So I took $20,000 and disappeared. I've been working 3 jobs ever since just to survive. The third woman, Rachel, spoke last. She was the most recent before Mariah, married just 5 years ago. I almost died, she said bluntly. Victoria had me thrown out in winter, no coat, no money, nothing. I collapsed from hypothermia and spent a week in the hospital. When I woke up, there was a check for $10,000 and a legal document saying if I ever spoke about the Hawthorns, they'd sue me for everything I'd ever earn. I signed because I was terrified. I've been terrified for 5 years. Mariah looked at these 3 women, each one broken in different ways by the same family, and something hardened in her chest. This wasn't just about her anymore. This was about a pattern of abuse that had destroyed multiple lives, about a woman who used her wealth and status as weapons against anyone she deemed beneath her. We're going public with all of this, Mariah said. Every story, every detail, every piece of evidence. We're going to make sure that when people hear the name Hawthorne, they don't think of wealth and status. They think of cruelty and consequences. Sarah shook her head. The NDAs we signed are unenforceable when they cover criminal activity, Andre said, entering the room with his lawyer. You can't be sued for telling the truth about fraud, abuse, and abandonment. We've had our legal team review all 3 of your agreements. They're worthless. He set down folders in front of each woman. These are your options. You can speak publicly, adding your voices to Mariah's, and we'll provide legal protection against any retaliation. Or you can stay silent, which is also valid. Either way, we're offering financial support, counseling, legal fees, compensation for what was taken from you. No strings attached. Jennifer laughed bitterly. Why? Why would you help us? We're not your problem. Because my sister isn't the only victim, Andre said simply. And because wealth should be used to help people, not destroy them. That's the difference between me and the Hawthorns. Over the next week, the 4 women worked together, coordinating their stories, gathering evidence, and preparing for the media storm that would follow. A journalist from a major newspaper agreed to write a comprehensive piece, interviewing all 4 women, documenting the pattern of abuse spanning 15 years. The article dropped on a Sunday morning, 30 pages of devastating detail, and the reaction was immediate and explosive. Social media erupted with support for the women and condemnation of the Hawthorns. Other families came forward with similar stories of Victoria's cruelty. Former staff members gave interviews describing the toxic environment inside the estate. Business associates revealed deals gone bad, money owed, promises broken. Within 48 hours, the Hawthorne name had become synonymous with everything wrong with inherited wealth and unchecked privilege. Victoria's trial date was moved up due to public pressure. Gregory's attempts to find employment anywhere were met with doors slammed in his face. Even distant relatives began changing their names, desperate to distance themselves from the scandal. Mariah watched it all with a strange sense of detachment. She had wanted justice, and she was getting it. But she had also wanted closure, and that felt more elusive. Is it enough? She asked Andre one evening, the twins asleep in their nursery, the city lights glittering below. Is that enough? This. All of it. The public destruction, the criminal charges, the complete annihilation of their reputation. When does it end? Andre was quiet for a long moment. It ends when you decide it ends. When you can look at your children and honestly say you did everything necessary to protect them and nothing more. When the scales feel balanced. Mariah thought about the other women, about Sarah's son, who would never know his father, about Jennifer working 3 jobs, about Rachel's nightmares. She thought about her own twins, innocent and perfect, who deserved better than to grow up defined by their father's cruelty. I want one more thing, she said. What? I want Gregory to meet his children. Not for him. For them. So someday when they ask about their father, I can honestly say I gave him the chance to be in their lives, and he chose not to take it. I want that closure. Andre looked skeptical. You think he'll refuse? I know he will. But I need to offer. I need to be able to tell my children I tried. The meeting was arranged for the following week, in a neutral location with witnesses present. Gregory arrived looking haggard, his expensive clothes no longer fitting quite right, his confidence replaced with desperation. Mariah sat across from him with the twins in their carriers beside her, both babies awake and curious, looking around with wide eyes that were unmistakably Gregory's. He stared at them, his face unreadable. They're beautiful, he said finally. They look like you. They look like both of us, Mariah corrected. They're your children, Gregory. Your son and daughter. And I'm here to offer you one chance to be part of their lives. Supervised visits, child support, a relationship with your own flesh and blood. All you have to do is acknowledge them publicly, accept responsibility, and commit to being present. The silence stretched. Gregory looked at the babies, then at Mariah, then at his hands. I can't, he whispered. I can't do what you're asking. My life is destroyed. I have nothing to offer them. They're better off without me. Mariah had expected it, but hearing the words still hurt. Not for herself, but for her children, who would grow up knowing their father had been offered a chance to love them and had walked away. "Then we're done," she said quietly. "You're released from all obligation except financial support, which the court has already ordered. You'll never see these children again unless they choose to find you when they're adults. And when they do, when they ask why you weren't there, I'll tell them the truth, that you were given every opportunity and you chose to walk away." Gregory's eyes filled with tears, but he didn't argue, didn't fight, didn't try to change her mind. He simply stood, looked one last time at his children, and left. And with his leaving, something in Mariah finally settled. The revenge was complete. The redemption had begun. 6 months had passed since Gregory walked away from his children, and the world had transformed in ways Mariah could never have imagined. The Hawthorne estate stood before her now, its gates open, its grounds meticulously maintained, but everything about it had changed. The foreclosure had gone through exactly as Andre predicted, and Mariah had purchased the property for a fraction of its supposed value, paying cash from funds Andre had structured in her name. Victoria was serving 18 months in a minimum security federal prison after pleading guilty to reduced charges, her lawyers having negotiated the best deal they could manage given the overwhelming evidence. Gregory had disappeared entirely, rumored to be working some menial job in another state under a different name, his pride finally broken beyond repair. And Mariah stood at the entrance of what had once been her prison, preparing to transform it into something completely different. The twins were with Helen today, giving Mariah time to walk through the estate alone, to confront the ghosts of who she had been and celebrate who she had become. She moved through rooms that had witnessed her humiliation, touching walls that had echoed with Victoria's insults, standing in spaces where she had felt so small and worthless. But the fear was gone. The shame had evaporated. She was no longer the desperate woman begging for acceptance. She was the owner, the victor, the woman who had survived and thrived despite everything thrown at her. Andre found her in the library, the room where she had once caught Gregory with Lila, their intimacy a knife in her already wounded heart. Thinking about burning it down, he asked with a slight smile. Thought about it, Mariah admitted. But that would be wasteful. Better to transform it into something useful. Have you decided what that something is? She turned to face him, her decision made weeks ago, but only now feeling completely right. A shelter. For women escaping abusive relationships, specifically ones where wealth and status are used as weapons. A place where they can bring their children, get legal help, receive counseling, and rebuild their lives without judgment or shame. I want to call it Second Chance's house. Andre's expression shifted, pride and approval mixing with something deeper. That's perfect. That's exactly what this place should be. I've been working with Sarah, Jennifer, and Rachel. They want to be involved to help other women avoid what we went through. Sarah's going back to school for social work. Jennifer wants to manage operations. Rachel's training to be a counselor. We're building something real here, Andre. Something that matters. Mother will be proud, Andre said quietly, referring to their late mother, who had raised them alone after their father died, who had worked 3 jobs to give them opportunities, who had taught them that strength came from helping others, not stepping on them. Mariah felt tears prick her eyes at the mention of their mother. I wish she could see this. I wish she could meet her grandchildren. She'd tell you that you were always strong enough, that she knew you'd find your way. Andre pulled out his phone, showing Mariah architectural plans. I had designers draw these up based on your vision. 22 bedrooms converted into family suites, commercial kitchen, child care center, legal offices, counseling rooms, medical facilities, everything a woman needs to escape and start over. The plans were beautiful, thoughtful, exactly what Mariah had imagined, but rendered with professional precision. How much will this cost? Less than the estate is worth. And I'm covering it. Consider it my contribution to making sure Victoria's legacy becomes something she'd hate, actual help for the people she used to destroy. Mariah hugged her brother, this man who had saved her in every way possible, who had used his wealth not to control but to empower, who had proven that family meant showing up when it mattered most. Thank you. For everything. I couldn't have survived this without you. Yes, you could have. You're stronger than you know. I just made it easier. They walked through the gardens where the luncheon had taken place, where Victoria had been forced to apologize in front of society's elite. The space felt different now, cleansed somehow, ready for new memories that weren't built on cruelty and shame. Catherine Sterling was waiting by the fountain, having asked to meet Mariah here today. She looked better than the last time they'd spoken, less burdened, like confession and consequence had freed something in her. The contractors are ready to start next week, Catherine said. She had become involved in the project, using her connections and resources to help make Second Chance's house a reality. I've secured donations from 15 families who want to support the cause, and 3 law firms have agreed to provide free legal services. That's incredible, Mariah said. Why are you doing all this? The testimony was enough. Because I spent 20 years being the kind of woman who watched abuse and did nothing. I can't get those years back, but I can make sure the next 20 are different. This is my redemption, Mariah. Let me have it. Mariah understood. They were all seeking redemption in their own ways. Catherine for her silence, the other wives for their survival, even Mariah herself for having believed that love could excuse cruelty. Then let's build something worth redeeming ourselves for. Over the following months, the transformation of the estate became a community project. Volunteers painted walls, donated furniture, and organized supply drives. Local businesses contributed services. Even some of Victoria's former society friends, horrified by what had been done in their circles, stepped forward to help, desperate to prove they were different, better, willing to do the right thing. The grand opening of Second Chance's house happened on a bright Saturday morning, exactly 1 year after Mariah had been thrown out pregnant in the rain. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Media coverage was extensive but respectful, focusing on the mission rather than the scandal. Mariah stood at the podium, her twins, now walking and babbling and full of personality, playing nearby with Helen watching over them. She looked out at the crowd of supporters, survivors, and allies, and felt a sense of purpose she had never experienced before. A year ago, I stood in the rain outside these gates, pregnant and terrified, believing my life was over. The people who lived here told me I was nothing, that my children were mistakes, that I deserved the cruelty they inflicted. They used their wealth and status as weapons, and they thought that made them powerful. She paused, letting the words settle. But they were wrong. Real power isn't about money or status or the ability to hurt others. Real power is surviving despite the cruelty. It's choosing to build instead of destroy. It's taking the worst thing that ever happened to you and transforming it into something that helps others avoid the same pain. The crowd applauded. Mariah saw Sarah in the front row, her 14-year-old son beside her, both of them smiling. Jennifer stood with her new business partner, the shelter's operations manager position, giving her stability she'd never had before. Rachel sat with a group of women she was already counseling, her own trauma becoming the foundation for helping others heal. Second Chance's house exists because I learned that you don't have to accept the role cruel people assign you. You can rewrite your story. You can take back your power. You can refuse to disappear just because someone decided you weren't worth keeping. She looked at her twins, these beautiful children who had been called mistakes by their own father, who had become the reason she found strength she didn't know she possessed. And you can build a legacy that matters, not because of what was done to you, but because of what you chose to do afterward. The ribbon cutting was ceremonial but meaningful. As the doors officially opened and the first families began moving into their suites, Mariah felt something shift in her chest. This was closure. This was justice. This was proof that survival wasn't enough. You had to thrive, had to transform, had to become someone who made the world slightly better for having been broken and rebuilt. That evening, after the crowds dispersed and the families settled in, Mariah walked through the quiet halls of the shelter with Andre. Do you ever wonder what Victoria thinks about this? Andre asked, knowing that her precious estate is now housing the exact type of women she used to destroy. Probably makes her furious, Mariah said. Good. She earned the fury. They reached what had been Victoria's sitting room, the throne from which she had ruled her empire of cruelty. Now it was a legal aid office, filled with case files and law books and paralegals working late to help women navigate divorce, custody, and restraining orders. "This is my favorite room," Mariah admitted. "Why?" "Because this is where she told me I was nothing, that my children were mistakes, that I'd never matter. And now it's the room where other women are told they matter, that their children are blessings, that they deserve dignity and safety. It's perfect symmetry." Andre smiled. "You did that. You turned poison into medicine. We did it. All of us, you, Catherine, the other wives, everyone who decided that watching abuse wasn't acceptable anymore." She looked out the window at the gardens where families were gathering for dinner, children playing, mothers talking with counselors, hope beginning to grow where only cruelty had existed before. Her phone buzzed with a text from Helen. Twins asking for Mama. "Ready when you are." Mariah smiled. The best part of every day was returning to her children, watching them grow without the shadow of the Hawthorne name hanging over them, teaching them that strength came from kindness, not cruelty. "I need to go," she told Andre. "But thank you for being the family I needed when the family I married tried to destroy me. That's what family does. We show up, we fight, we protect, and we help each other build something worth fighting for." As Mariah drove away from Second Chance's house, the Rolls-Royce that had announced her return now a familiar comfort, she thought about the journey that had brought her here. From naive bride to discarded wife to survivor to victor to something even more important, someone who used her pain to prevent others from experiencing the same. The twins were ecstatic when she arrived, both trying to talk at once. Their words still jumbled, but their meaning clear. They wanted her attention, her love, her presence. Nothing else mattered to them. Not money, not status, not revenge or justice or legacy. Just her. She scooped them up, one in each arm, and they settled against her shoulders with the absolute trust that only children possess. "Let me tell you a story," she whispered to them as she carried them to their room. "Once upon a time, there was a woman who thought she needed someone else to make her valuable. She thought love meant accepting cruelty, that family meant submitting to abuse, that her worth was determined by people who couldn't see past their own pride. She laid them in their beds, tucking blankets around them with practiced care. But then something happened. She was thrown away, cast out, told she was nothing. And in that moment of absolute darkness, she discovered something important. She discovered that worth comes from within, that family means people who protect you, not destroy you, and that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the catalyst for becoming who you were always meant to be." The twins were falling asleep, their eyes drooping, but Mariah finished the story anyway. She learned that power isn't about making others small. It's about helping them grow. It's about taking your pain and transforming it into purpose. It's about refusing to let cruelty win, refusing to disappear, refusing to accept the story others write for you. She kissed each of their foreheads, and she learned that the best revenge isn't destruction. It's becoming someone so strong, so good, so purposeful that the people who tried to break you are forgotten while you're remembered for what you built. In the doorway, Andre watched, his expression soft. "They're lucky to have you. I'm lucky to have them. They saved me as much as you did. They gave me a reason to fight when I wanted to give up. That's what children do. They make us better than we thought we could be." Mariah closed the door softly, leaving the twins to sleep, and walked with Andre to the balcony overlooking the city. Somewhere out there, Victoria sat in a cell thinking about the empire she'd lost. Somewhere, Gregory worked a job he'd once considered beneath him, living with the consequences of choosing pride over family. Somewhere, Lila reinvented herself under a new name, having learned that beauty and cunning weren't enough without character. And here, Mariah stood in the home Andre had built for her, looking at a future she had created through strength, strategy, and refusing to accept the role of victim. Have you ever realized that your greatest triumph was simply surviving and choosing to be kind anyway? What happens now? Andre asked. Now I am raising my children. I run the shelter. I help other women find their strength. I build a life that matters, not because of what was done to me, but because of what I chose to do afterward." She smiled, feeling the weight of the past year finally lift. "And I forgive myself for believing I needed them in the first place." That's the last piece. Not forgiving them, they don't deserve that. But forgiving myself for being human, for wanting love, for thinking I could change people who didn't want to change. That's the hardest forgiveness, Andre said. Forgiving yourself. But it's the most important one. The city lights glittered below them, millions of lives being lived, millions of stories unfolding, millions of people facing their own battles between who they were and who they wanted to become. Mariah's story was just one among many, but it was hers, and she had rewritten it on her own terms. The woman who had arrived at the Hawthorne estate with hope and left with nothing had become someone who needed nothing from them because she had everything that mattered. Her children, her family, her purpose, and her unshakable certainty that she was worth fighting for. They thought they could break her. They thought cruelty was power. They thought wealth and status made them untouchable. They were wrong about everything. Because Mariah had learned the most important lesson of all. You can't break someone who refuses to stay broken. You can't destroy someone who transforms pain into purpose. And you can't erase someone who uses their survival to help others survive too. The Hawthorns had kicked out a pregnant woman for being beneath them. And that woman had risen so far above them that they couldn't even see her anymore. That was the real triumph. Not the legal victories, or the financial ruin, or the public humiliation. The triumph was that Mariah had become someone who no longer needed their validation, their acceptance, or their acknowledgement. She had everything she needed within herself and in the family who actually loved her. As the night deepened and the twins slept peacefully, Mariah stood on her balcony and smiled at the life she had built from ashes. This was her legacy. Not revenge, not bitterness, not destruction, but strength, purpose, and the absolute refusal to let cruelty win. They had tried to write her story as a tragedy. She had rewritten it as a triumph. And somewhere, someone else who was being told they were nothing would hear this story and realize they were everything. That was worth more than any revenge could ever be.